Hi, it's me, Karen Romano Young, with another chapter of A Girl, a Raccoon, and the Midnight Moon, with gorgeous pictures by Jessica Bagley, published by Chronicle Kids in 2020. Chapter 17, A Message from Mrs. Malamar. September 25th. Pearl told Simon how she had gotten in a fight with Gully and asked, "Why do you think Gully wants the library gone?" Simon had a look on his face like he smelled a rat, and the rat was Gully. "Look, it's a question of money," he said. "Your mom explained it to me." "My mom?" "Gully's not just a storekeeper. He's a landlord. He lives there and works there, but he also owns that building. So it's not just that he thinks he'll have more customers if the library turns into apartments. He thinks the value of the street will go up, which would mean he can charge more rent. Don't you think he'd love to kick all the grannies out and get some fancy young professional couple in there to pay big rent?" Simon had a way of flinging his hands around when he got irritated. He was doing it now. "Well, what fancy professional couple wants to live above a lousy, junky store?" sputtered furious Pearl. "That apartment was Francine's." "No problem," said Simon. "If the tone of the neighborhood got raised, he'd rent the store out to some chain furniture store and retire to rake in the bucks." This only helped confirm Pearl's theory. "Do you think Gully took the statue?" "With those little bandy arms," said Simon. "No muscles on him." Pearl giggled. "Maybe he paid someone else to do it." Simon looked into her face with sympathy and shrugged. "I don't think he needed to have the head stolen. The real estate vultures were already circling, as your mom said. If it wasn't Mr. Bull and Mr. Dozer, it was bound to be somebody else. It's a beautiful property." "It's not a beautiful property," Pearl exclaimed. "It's a beautiful library." "It is," said Simon, in a way that told her he didn't know if the library would always be beautiful, or would always be a library. He put his hand on her head as if to wiggle it around, but then went back to work. "If I could just find the head," Pearl said. "Your mom thinks Oleg's new head will get us another story in the paper, a hopeful one." "Sure. Well, wouldn't finding the old head do the same thing?" "If only the raccoons could talk," said Simon. Pearl laughed. "Then we could charge admission." She got into the book elevator and sat there alone so she could think in the dark, cool peace. Was she crazy thinking Gully might have taken Vincent's head? Was she crazy thinking a raccoon had left her a note? In a situation like this, she'd heard Mom tell Bruce enough times, it was vital to think creatively outside the box. Speaking of boxes, Pearl thought of the shed-shaped box in the yew hedge and of who came and got the stuff out and when. She knew now that it was Mr. Nichols, and she guessed he came at night. So maybe he'd seen Gully take the head, and that was why Gully distrusted him. Or maybe he'd taken the head himself, and that was why Gully distrusted him. And as for the raccoons writing notes, she figured she'd just heard too many of Mom's stories, so her imagination was overactive. It was Mom herself who had told Pearl she needed to face reality. Reality was what exactly? Reality was raccoons not writing. Reality was granola bars not making up for not having your own kitchen. Reality was an umbrella keeping people's eyes off you, but not keeping out the cold. Reality was the real estate market. Reality was not enough books circulating because of not enough library patrons coming in the door, because not enough people were readers. "Pearl!" Simon yanked open the book elevator door. "Quit!" He peered in, stared at her face. "Moping or hiding or whatever you're doing." "I'm facing reality," said Pearl. "Do you have to do it in the book elevator?" He gave her his hand and pulled her out. "It's your day to do the coffee run. Better get going." Pearl trudged off to Cozy Soup and Burger, pausing at the newsstand on the way back for the evening moon. Tallulah seemed even more grumbly and sleepy than usual. "Yes, the delivery's late. 1 second, 1 second." Pearl hitched her cardboard coffee tray onto the ledge, thinking she should just come back later if the paper wasn't even there. But then Tallulah turned and smiled as though it was a relief to see her. "Pearl, you live on Beep Street, don't you? Think you could carry a message for me?" She pulled a sheet of paper from her order book and wrote on it in pencil. Pearl heard her mumble as she wrote, "What I'm supposed to do about night staff being late, I'd like to know." Tallulah folded the sheet and tucked it and a newspaper between Pearl's thumb and the side of the coffee tray. 22.5 Beep Street, she said. Don't buzz, you'll wake up the resident. Just put it in the lower mail slot, that's all. So, instead of heading back to the library, Pearl made an overburdened dash for Beep Street. Which one was 22.5? Her own house was number 8. How had she lived her whole life without realizing there were half numbers on their street? Number 22 was a metal-gated door with a stoop like most on their street, this one festooned with twisted wisteria branches and veiled in ivy, with one mail slot that just said 22. Where was 22.5? She didn't see a door that went with that number, only a tiny slot on number 22's front wall, the length of Pearl's little finger, with a small full moon above it. You'd have to roll the moon to fit it into this mail slot, and letters could only be a quarter of the size of a postcard. Tallulah's note was folded absurdly small and tight, but Pearl couldn't resist peeking at it. Mrs. M. Matilda out sick and needs Mary Ann to keep Eric out of trouble. Counting on you at 12. Tallulah. This collection of names set Pearl's heart racing. This note represented 2 possibilities. 1, Mom had been telling stories about raccoons that she'd named after a bunch of people who also knew Tallulah and to whom Tallulah was sending this note? I don't think so, thought Pearl. As far as she knew, Mom didn't know any other Matildas. 2, Tallulah's note was for the same raccoons Mom's stories were about. Yeah, sure, thought Pearl. Why would Tallulah write a note to any raccoons? Never mind Mom's. Mrs. M? Mrs. M, who lived at 22.5 Beep Street? She was the big lumbering raccoon who'd walked by Mom and Pearl, and she was due at the newsstand at 12 midnight. And Matilda? Pearl knew that one all right. Mrs. Malamar's daughter, whose name was another word for the moon. Mary Ann? She must have been the bigger raccoon of the 2 that had been in the alley, the one screeching at Pearl to put the little one down because Eric? That name she'd seen in the raccoon book, needing to be kept out of trouble, like that little raccoon she'd saved, when Mary Ann couldn't keep him off the street. Pearl knew she was supposed to think that Mom's stories were just stories, not real. Despite all those stories about the editor-in-chief of the Midnight Moon and her daughter, it was Mom who told Pearl to face reality. And yet, as Pearl stood there facing it, she realized she knew more than Mom, because she knew Mary Ann and Eric. They were part of the neighborhood's reality, which was raccoons. For the rest of the afternoon and evening, Pearl was unusually quiet, so quiet that by the time they'd gotten through the 4 o'clock staff meeting, closing, homework, supper, and bath time, Mom asked Pearl if she was feeling all right. Yeah, why? Said Pearl blankly on purpose. Mom felt her forehead and shrugged. No reason, she said, looking into Pearl's eyes. Pearl shrugged back. She went to bed at her normal time and told herself to go to sleep. But she lay there looking up at her In the Night Kitchen poster until Mom finished in the bathroom and got into bed herself. When Pearl was a little kid, she had been intrigued by what happened at night while she was sleeping. She knew, of course, that adults stayed up later, their lights on, doing things. You couldn't live in New York City without developing an awareness that someone, somewhere, was always up and about. And yet she was also familiar with the sleeping faces of buildings and businesses, shades down, metal gates unrolled, shutters shut, and, at Tallulah's newsstand, the absence of Tallulah. The only time Pearl went to the newsstand after dark was Saturday night, when you could get the Sunday paper early, so then you could just stay in your pajamas and be cozy on Sunday. Every other night the rest of the week, Tallulah closed up and turned off the lights by 9. So what about the midnight moon? Pearl jerked awake. The kitchen clock showed 11:51, almost 12. Was anyone in the newsstand now? Pearl had to see for herself. She padded across to the apartment door. Mom was snoring in her bedroom. Pearl could join a band of robbers herself, she was so sneaky. She pulled on Mom's black hoodie and stuck one flip-flop in the apartment door, tiptoed down the stairs, and wedged the other in the building door. Then she was fast, so fast. She ran barefoot on a New York City sidewalk. She headed along Beep Street, across Lancaster Avenue to 7th Avenue, and stopped just short of the corner. Around that corner was the subway entrance, with the newsstand beside it. A glow of light showed it was open, but not at the normal window that even Mom had to reach up to. This was a door with a window cut in it right at Pearl's knees. The perfect height for a raccoon, she realized. She felt the rumble of a subway train coming underground. After a few moments, the sound and vibrations stopped, then started, then diminished. There was a hustle and bustle as people emerged up the steps and made their way down the street. Nobody paused at the newsstand, and nobody saw Pearl crouch silently on a stoop. Any minute now, she thought, my theory will be proven, or not. And just then she heard it and froze. It sounded as if someone was dragging a coat so long that it swished along the ground. And there it was, a raccoon. It was the same one she'd seen with Mom, all right, Mrs. Malamar. The swishing noise was her fat, striped tail brushing the pavement. Could she see Pearl? Could she smell her? Pearl realized she really didn't know that much about wild animals. The raccoon swept past and crossed the street to the newsstand, hurrying along on all fours, making that ack squawk Pearl now realized was raccoon talk. She went into the little door in the newsstand. It was a raccoon door, Pearl realized, with happiness that she'd guessed right. Then Tallulah came out the regular side door, reached up and pulled a newspaper from a clip, rolled it into a tube and stuck it under her arm, and passed by Pearl as she headed along Lancaster Avenue. In the little low window, Pearl could see the black, intelligent gleam of Mrs. Malamar's eyes as she gazed out from amid the clotheslined fringes of moons, the bags of almonds and sunflower seeds that might have appealed just as well to raccoons as to humans, the multicolored magazines and wrapped candy. Pearl backed away, smiling. She trotted home, keeping to the shadows of the small trees along the street, tiptoeing down the sidewalk, and let herself in, removing the flip-flops wedged in the doors. Surprisingly quickly, she found herself sitting on her chair bed, where she belonged, sleepy but wired. Had any of this really happened? Yes? Sure. Right? Her mother turned over in her sleep and called out, "Pearl? Just going to the bathroom." Pearl made her voice drowsy. She went into the bathroom, flushed the toilet, and went back to bed. And then she had a sort of argument with herself, in which she went over everything that had just happened, as if she was explaining it to someone extremely logical, like, say, Ramon, or maybe Elsa at school. She had to give just the evidence, no fantasy. First, she had dropped a note in a mail slot, a note about someone named Mrs. M showing up for work at the newsstand at midnight. Then, a raccoon had gone inside the newsstand and taken up position at a smaller, raccoon-sized door. Then, Tallulah had left the newsstand as if she was getting off work, like someone else had taken over the shift. Pearl lay back in her chair bed and stared up at her poster. Strange things did happen in New York at night. Pearl had just seen proof, but who was to say reading raccoons were any stranger than people doing math worksheets or getting Choco Tacos from the Mr. Softy truck or sleeping behind umbrellas or riding in tunnels under the street at all hours of the night? Every one of those things would sound like fiction if you didn't know they were true. Pearl could feel herself teetering on the brink between believing her eyes and sticking to the facts. Raccoons reading papers, raccoons writing papers, raccoons selling papers. And with that, Pearl chose to believe it was true. It wasn't just the New York City night that had made it true. It was the fact that when New Yorkers needed something, they made it happen, no matter what. New Yorkers needed to move around the city at all hours, so trains ran underground all night. New Yorkers needed bread in the morning, so there were bakers baking it all night. New Yorkers, nocturnal New Yorkers, but New Yorkers nonetheless, needed the news, so there were raccoons writing it and printing it and selling it, and Pearl had just seen proof, if she needed any. A sidebar about bread. Maurice Sendak, who wrote and illustrated In the Night Kitchen, wrote about the mysterious quality of bread. As he wrote, bread is made in the dark of the night, a time when kids know that anything can happen. Not only is bread not there at dusk and there at dawn, it is made by people who do what human children cannot, get up in the middle of the night and stay awake till dawn. Kids wake up at dawn, and by that time the magic is complete. The bread is baked. There is another mystery about bread and how it rises to its beautiful crusty roundness. There is a potion, a fermented soup of grain or fruit that has a chemical reaction with the water, salt, and flour of the batter. That reaction bubbles up. It makes the bread size change. Bakers save a bit of the potion, feeding it to the next batch of bread. They pass it down, like stories, from one loaf to the next. And when they move to a new location, they carry their potion in special jars, keeping it safe for the following generation. By M.A.M. Why should Pearl need any proof? Hadn't her own mother told her about these very neighborhood raccoons her whole life? Pearl brushed her feet together, and some sidewalk dust rubbed off, proof of her midnight expedition. She'd always believed her mother's stories were made up, but now it turned out that she had been wrong and Mom had been right. A raccoon really had gone to work selling the midnight moon after reading a note that Pearl had delivered with her own hand. Pearl decided it with a bang. She had seen what she thought she'd seen. See you tomorrow.